In 1939, Bertolt Brecht wrote a play called Mother Courage and Her Children. In 1996, Thomas Friedman wrote an article about the Golden Arches theory of conflict prevention. How are these things connected? I'm going to explain. Mother Courage and Her Children is about an intersection of commerce and warfare, and about how war is a commercial activity every bit as much as it is a physical conflict activity. If, as Napoleon said, an army marches on its stomach, which is just obviously true, if your troops don't eat, they can't fight, then war is inextricably connected to economics and material conditions. Dwight Eisenhower was the top general in World War II, and he said, when he became president, every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. Eisenhower opposed the military-industrial complex, which was part of why America was economically successful in the wake of the war. But he knew that if it continued, and what we were focused on was making weapons of war, then it didn't really matter how well the economy was going. People were not going to be fed and clothed and sheltered. So we skip to 1996. Thomas Friedman writes this article, Golden Arches Theory of Conflict Prevention. His thesis was that if you have a McDonald's and another country has a McDonald's, then your countries are not going to fight. It wasn't strictly true at the time, and it's certainly not true now after the invasion of Ukraine. It's probably the clearest example of a violation of the Golden Arches theory of conflict prevention. But in principle, it's true, and it applies to our country within itself as well. One of the great innovations of 20th century capitalism was the realization that if you keep a status quo that is tolerable to the people who live within it, then they're less likely to fight back. So the wage and hour protections and the workers' rights protections and the protections of unions that were allowed and proliferated through the 20th century were in the name of fostering greater stability, such that we, the workers, would not fight against they, the wealthy, the capitalists, the ones who control our work and our lives and our access to resources. In other words, it's just like the Matrix. The Matrix could not be perfect. They tried it several times, and it kept failing because the mind would literally reject it. Not exactly the same, but the idea is that a uncomfortable stability is maintainable. So if we are underpaid and we are striving and we are desperate and our kids are hungry and we have student loans and we can't afford to buy a house, etc., 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 so long as things are stable, so long as the victims of poverty are overwhelmingly black and brown and immigrants and minorities of all kinds, then it seems like everything is okay. In the words of the Joker, if it's under the plan, then no one freaks out. But when things violate the plan, people tend to rebel. So the Golden Arches theory of conflict prevention prevents conflict between us, the workers, and them, the wealthy, who own and control our lives. Because so long as we have McDonald's, so long as the Golden Arches are standing, we're fine, even when our lives are unbearably awful, even when things are truly terrible, when we have debt and we can't get the things that we need and food is too expensive and we are precarious and scared. The trick is when you push stability too far. And I argue that that's the threshold that we are crossing and arguably have crossed. Too many people are not merely precarious, middle class, doing okay, but afraid that the world might conspire against them and they get unlucky and then things are worse, but actually that things are already so bad for so many people in economic terms that affect their real lives, their inability to get health care and pay their student loans and buy a house and afford groceries. It all piles up. And eventually, it will not prevent conflict anymore.